Hello everyone. We are all familiar with the French military presence in Africa. This is the result of a long colonial process, but not for much longer. They will certainly have to withdraw completely. The UK, Germany, and Italy also have some military bases there to protect economic interests, but their influence is not that large. Russia always keeps everything secret. However, according to a report from the German Foreign Ministry, Moscow has bases in 7 African countries, mostly operating through the Wagner Group with the mission of accessing resources and expanding influence in the region. Although they have made a big impression by supporting many African countries to erase debt as well as escape from the colonial past of France, Russia's allowed presence is still too small compared to what they have done. One reason for this is that the rarely mentioned top dog, the US, already has a fairly firm foothold here. According to the Institute for African Security Studies in Washington, it has around 7,000 troops stationed at 34 bases in 15 countries, a huge surprise. Why is the US allowed to build so many bases, and what are they doing in Africa? In 2002, a year after the 9/11 attacks on US soil that caused public panic, President George Walker Bush initiated a little-known counter-terrorism program called the Pan-Sahel Initiative. Its purpose was to eliminate al-Qaeda and related groups found in North Africa, thereby helping to prevent threats from afar. Al-Qaeda and ISIS both have headquarters in the Middle East. These two organizations have quite similar goals. One is to expel the West from Muslim lands, and two is to establish a transnational state headed by a supreme leader. This inadvertently unified the US and North African governments. Both see terrorist organizations as the enemy, so countries like Niger, Chad, Cameroon, and South Sudan agreed one by one to allow Washington to set up bases on their territory. Not only were they reinforced with more troops to help fight insurgents, African countries also received support in training, technology sharing, and capabilities enhancement to improve national defense. They even got money. The US pays hundreds of millions of dollars in fees each year, with just Djibouti receiving $38 million annually. In addition, for countries seeking democracy and stability, the US also prioritizes economic and humanitarian aid. For example, Kenya receives $525 million each year, Uganda $450 million, and Niger over $100 million. For poor African countries, these are very meaningful amounts. With such generous aid, who wouldn't want bases? However, wherever the US goes, terrorism appears and vice versa, because as mentioned above, the two sides see each other as enemies. Therefore, while many regional countries welcome US forces, they also fear stronger terrorist operations, and so no one dares to let Washington locate the headquarters of the US Africa Command. For now, the US still has to command from a base in Stuttgart, Germany. Now we will answer. Firstly, to promote democracy. Wherever the US goes, it does this because it wants to create friendly governments for long-term cooperation and prevent rivals like Russia and China from gaining a foothold in the region. However, so far it has not been very successful. Out of 54 countries, only 14 have achieved democracy, 8 imperfect democracies, 8 fledgling democracies. The rest are mostly dictatorship, and dictatorship are not afraid to cooperate with Russia and China, so the US has had to be flexible in its foreign policies to enhance relationships. Secondly, the US has a tradition of demonstrating global power through military presence everywhere, including Africa. The purpose is to send a message to other countries: cooperate with us and you will be protected. When security and stability exist, we will talk about economic issues. Along with establishing military bases in other countries, they get to know a lot of things like intelligence, internal power struggles, or conflicts with neighbors. From there, the US can come up with the most sensible cooperation or intervention policies. Thirdly, Washington and its allies see Africa as a region with great potential for development, so it needs to get ahead of rivals to pave the way for the future. According to the Brookings Institution, a leading US policy research center, Africa will be at the center of the world in the next 3 decades. Specifically, the region's population will account for 30% of the global total by 2050. The growing middle class with high consumption potential will reach nearly 1 billion people, thus opening up a huge market for countries to rush into. Africa also has the potential to become the world's next production center. One reason is the extremely cheap labor costs compared to the rising costs in other areas like China and India. Second, Goods circulating within the region enjoy 90% tariff reductions through the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement effective 2021. This significantly benefits the costs of companies manufacturing and distributing products wanting to penetrate the market. According to many economic experts' predictions, in less than 10 years, Africa will become the destination for thousands of multinational corporations to halt their steps. Right now, Washington and its allies have moved ahead of rivals like Russia and China by commanding the largest capital investment in Africa. According to the UN, this is led by the UK with $60 billion, followed by equal amounts of $54 billion from France, the US and the Netherlands. Yet Beijing has only invested over $43 billion, and they have made a big fuss about China taking over Africa. The US and allies combined have dozens of bases in the region, while China only has one in Djibouti yet is accused of having expansionist ambitions. Apart from strong developmental potential, Africa is an important source of global raw materials including 12% of oil, 8% of natural gas, 30% of minerals including 40% of gold, 90% of chromium and platinum, 35% of bauxite. The main component for aluminum production, and 2/3 of cobalt deposits an essential element in lithium-ion batteries used in phones, computers and electric vehicles. As expected, Western companies currently control most resource extraction activities in Africa. According to a report from the London-based charity War on Want, 101 British companies now control Africa's important mineral resources, especially gold, platinum, diamonds, gas-rich copper and coal, with a total value of over $1 trillion. Similarly, France has over 200 companies operating in 14 former colonies. And of course, there is the US, but having come later, they only have dozens of companies active in the resource sector. Controlling extraction rights and then importing back home at low prices helps Western powers ensure stable supplies of raw materials that make up products worth hundreds of times more after processing. This is the prosperity. These are the reasons why the US and its allies always have troops in Africa to protect their economic interests while tightening the door to prevent Russia and China from stepping into areas under their control.